The sandbag to shoulder and video games. Here we go again. A couple years back, I got hooked on this fighting game called For Honor. If you haven't played it, there are different factions based on cool things from history, knights, Vikings, samurai, and a few others, and each faction has different characters you can choose from, each based on different classes: assassins, tanks or heavies, warriors or vanguards, and hybrids. You choose your character and fight against others, either on a team or solo. I always liked the game because the skill curve is crazy high, even if that meant most of the time I lost. I mentioned For Honor in a video about the sandbag to shoulder for its Viking faction. Two characters from that faction are perfect representations of the extreme ends of sandbag to shoulder lifting technique. On one end is the Berserker, and on the other is the Warlord. The Berserker is a dual axe-wielding assassin character whose fighting style is centered around trading blows. Most characters are interrupted from attacking when hit, but the Berserker has hyper armor, allowing him to continue on with his relentless flurry of attacks, ignoring damage, almost as if he feels no pain. This is of course based on Viking Berserkers from the past, or at least the way we've come to view them. Even a small bit of research into this topic makes it clear we can't say with complete certainty what these warriors were actually like, or whether or not they even came to be during the Viking Age or sometime before then. I can't say for sure, but for the sake of this video, I think the popular interpretation paints a good picture. Berserkers were said to be warriors who took on the aspect of an animal by wearing its skin. There's some debate as to whether Berserker refers to actually wearing the skin of a bear or going into battle bare without armor, but it's said many people of the time believed an animal's spirit lived in its skin and could be transferred to a person if they wore it, so I think it makes sense they would have actually gone into battle wearing a skin. Unlike the Ulfhednar, the wolf warriors who were aggressive but controlled, capable of fighting alongside others in a pack, much like actual wolves do, Berserkers, the bear warriors, were loners who destroyed anything and everything in their path. This is just like the Berserker from For Honor. Attack after attack, relentless in their fury, heedless of incoming blows, focused only on what lies in front of them in the moment, uncaring for the totality of the battle. They're all raw power and rage. Then there's the Warlord. Most likely based on Drought, an earned title of respect given to battle leaders, the Warlord is like a tank. Wielding a sword and a shield, he leads his warriors from the front lines. Unlike the Berserker, the Warlord is controlled. He can see the battle ahead. Speed and explosiveness isn't the point. That stuff doesn't matter. He's the physical embodiment of the unstoppable force. Once the Warlord begins his charge, there's no stopping him. He just keeps going. Where the Berserker was all about rage and power, relentless and quick, you might say the Warlord has more of a strength endurance build, able to keep going at a high level for a long time, a sustained effort. These are like the two extremes of lifting a sandbag to the shoulder. On one end, you have the wild and aggressive continuous attack style. On the other, you have the steady and controlled style, a magnesium fire and a coal fire. Both are cool, and both are worth learning if you find them exciting. Today, with the help of a friend, I'd like to share some tips on each. This is how I prefer shouldering sandbags. There's something about the relentless attack style that I just find exciting. The Berserker method isn't necessarily about any one technique. You could use whichever lifting style you prefer: vertical, horizontal, double overhand, over-under. The method is more about how you lift. Like the Berserker and the Berserkergang, it's a state of mind, a state of intense rage and fury, of going berserk. Never stop to collect yourself. Never rest in any one place. Keep going, attack after attack. Once that sandbag leaves your lap, you must not stop throwing it higher until it reaches your shoulder. Like some kind of axe-wielding bear warrior, you must not let up. Every push of the sandbag should blend into the next, forming one continuous combo. Here are some things to help you out. First, the nature of this lifting style means you'll need to use medium to heavy weights. If the weight is too light, you'll be able to toss it to your shoulder in one go, which is cool too, but doesn't fit in. This is about continuous attack, not one mighty blow. If the weight is too heavy, it will take too many heaves to reach your shoulder, and you'll have no choice but to stop and collect yourself partway through. Typically, a sandbag that takes 2 to 4 heaves from the lap to the shoulder is best. Once you've chosen your preferred lifting technique and you've selected the right weight, the next step is to master every single part of the lift. Even though the Berserker is all about power and fury, without precision, he would be useless. Precision leads to speed. The best way to master your technique is to practice it. A lot. You need to make sure the sandbag lands in exactly the right position every single time. You need to know with complete certainty how to move from one spot to the next, how much rotation is needed if lifting from a horizontal position, how far off center the sandbag should be in each spot when lifting from a vertical position, where it needs to land with each toss, how to position yourself for max power every step of the way. You need technical mastery. Something that's helped me a lot with this is splitting the lift into multiple sections. If it takes you 3 heaves to shoulder the sandbag, one day you might just practice the first lift from the lap over and over. Another day you might practice the first 2, and another day you'll do the full thing, always trying to move from one position to the next as quickly as possible. It will also help to think of controlling momentum. As you catch the sandbag in one position, use the force absorbed by your body and redirect it to the next movement. Like a squat where you gather momentum on the descent and use it to spring yourself out of the bottom on the way up, learn to take control of the sandbag's force. Don't fear it as something that needs fighting, embrace it as your ally. Another thing you might try, if you're having trouble with any position on the way up to the shoulder, you can bring the sandbag to that exact spot and carry it there for time. This will teach you to get comfortable in that uncomfortable position, and you'll gain a lot of confidence there. Even if no one spot feels like a weak point, you can do this with every position to push yourself even further towards technical mastery. Something else you should consider is breathing. This technique is best done in one breath. Stopping to breathe in each new position will only slow you down and kills momentum. The lift becomes a collection of individual parts rather than one smooth flow. When the sandbag is on your lap, take a deep breath and brace, and hold that brace for the entire lift. To prevent lightheadedness, release a small amount of air each time the sandbag lands in a new position. Grunt or growl or scream or make a tss sound with each catch of the sandbag. For me, that looks something like sandbag on the lap, got my breath, I throw it up, catch it, tss, 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 just like that. Given enough time and practice, the continuous attack method feels like flying. No other exercise has ever been more satisfying to me than pulling off a perfectly executed Berserker-style sandbag to shoulder. For this lifting style, I wanted to bring someone on the channel who really knows what they're doing. Florian from Creative Training Hacks was the perfect choice. His lifting technique is pure, sustained, unrelenting grit and determination. It's about as different from the technique I use as is possible, and I still can't quite wrap my head around how he pulls it off. I'm excited to get some insight into how it's done.
Thank you so much, Cody, for letting me be a part of this awesome video. I'm really thrilled to be here. And I also find that warfare analogy you've come up with pretty much ideal for explaining the differences between our preferred sandbag to shoulder techniques. Hi everyone. So the first difference between the Berserker and the Warlord approach becomes apparent even before you touch the sandbag. The Berserker of lore is best known for his rage, whereas the Warlord has to stay calm and collected in order to make level-headed strategic decisions. Like Cody said, he can see the battle ahead. So instead of psyching myself up and mustering all of my aggressiveness, I rather sit down and get calm. Because if there is a realistic chance of failure, especially in case of a PR attempt, I tend to get really jittery. So I just sit there for a moment and monitor my breath. Then I close my eyes and imagine the whole attempt as vividly as possible from the ego perspective, including as many sensations as possible. The touch, the movement patterns and my corresponding breathing patterns, and also the strain shifting from muscle group to muscle group during the lift. The rustling of the sand, the stomping of my feet, the creaking of the floorboards, maybe even the smell of the sandbag if it has a distinctive one. And of course the feeling of triumph as I take one hand away at the top. Ideally, this preparation phase resembles an imaginary journey featuring the successful sandbag to shoulder attempt. So when I get up and approach the sandbag, my body knows exactly what to do because as far as my subconscious mind is concerned, it has already done it just a minute ago. Now for the pick up and lift to the lap, let's return to our warfare analogy. Metaphorically speaking, I like my Viking horde to be really overwhelming at this point, since it's inevitable that, alas, they will be decimated in the course of the battle. My warriors have to significantly outnumber the enemy, at least at the start. Transferred to the sandbag to shoulder attempt. This means I recommend you specifically train for a really strong and dominant pickup and lift to the lap. The less effort it takes you to get the sandbag there, the more strength you will have left for the upper phases of the lift. To this end, I also recommend you practice the horizontal pickup. Since you need the horizontal position anyway to go on, I find it better to have the sandbag already arrive in that position on the lap. At first, picking it up horizontally may feel harder than vertically, but rearranging the sandbag on your lap would not only need extra strength as well, but also consume a lot of your cardiovascular resources. Lifting Berserker style, that would be a non-issue, since from the lap on, regardless of success or failure, everything is over within a few seconds. But for the Warlord, there may come a point at which the battle will reach a temporary stalemate, namely during the transfer from the chest to the shoulder. And in that situation it is crucial that you don't get into an anaerobic state with a resulting build-up of lactic acid too soon. Or else you will reach muscular failure, just like in an intense set of any bodybuilding exercise. Keeping that possible fate in mind, I find it provident to not waste any breath fumbling around with the sandbag on my knees. So I really prefer to get it there the right way around already, without much ado. How smoothly that phase of the lift went and how it felt also determines how much time I have to spend in a deep squat with the sandbag on my lap. From a merely physiological standpoint, it would be optimal to go on immediately to use the elastic recoil of the tendons that will slack off after a few seconds. But in my experience, that advantage often gets outweighed by the psychological benefits of staying for a moment. The Berserker may use this time to work up even more rage. The Warlord, however, will evaluate the current situation of the battle, so to speak, and then reinforce the perceived weaknesses by directing more focus to them. Did your grip feel like it might slip? Did your upper back round a bit too much, maybe? How about the tension in your hamstrings? Whatever it might be, in most cases you can make up for it by paying more attention to it in your mind. The sandbag may be the same all the time, but your muscles are definitely not. How rested or fatigued they are relatively to each other is fluctuating all the time. Having the sandbag rest on your lap and taking a few deep breaths means you can direct your focus to the perceived shortcomings. Furthermore, compared to rushing on immediately, you can improve your starting position for the lift to the chest. Plan the battle ahead, so to speak. Squat down as deeply as you can, even by means of actively pulling your shins toward your feet using your tibialis anterior muscles. Yes, that is definitely not a position you can explode from. And yes, it will take you some time to get out of that hole, as the powerlifters call it. But remember, in the video game Cody mentioned, the Warlord belongs to the tank or heavies class. And a tank is no Ferrari. Nor does it have to be. Bear hug the sandbag symmetrically from both sides and pull it to your chest. The higher you can fixate it on your chest, the easier the transfer to the shoulder will be. As a rule of thumb, make sure that the upper edge of the sandbag is higher than your nose, or in case of a smaller sandbag, at least higher than your chin. Now at this point, the Warlord has to make another strategic decision. How deep a breath should you take? Deep enough for you to stabilize your core in any case. But depending on the horizontal girth of the sandbag, the length of your arms and the size of your rib cage, there may occur a problem with breathing in too deeply. Expanding your rib cage will push the sandbag farther away from your center of gravity and will also increase the distance between your hands. Both will compromise your bear hug. So you rather just breathe into your stomach and stop once your ribcage starts to expand too much. Take a couple of breaths and tighten your bear hug against them to find the ideal volume of air you want to have in your lungs for a stable core and a stable bear hug. Then you breathe in just as much as you've practiced. Hold your breath, tighten your core and crush the sandbag against your chest in an outburst of isometric power like an underground nuke test while you're standing up. Keep your back as perpendicular and straight as possible. While your upper back may round a bit, and most likely the sandbag will lose touch with your face, there is no reason why you shouldn't be able to keep up your lumbar lordosis. Compared to a round lower back, that will provide whole body stability. Now, regarding the Warlord, Cody mentioned grit and determination. This is where it comes into play, because it is absolutely imperative that you keep going until your forearms point upward. The steeper the better. To this end, you also have to extend your thoracic spine. That can be the hardest part of the whole sandbag to shoulder attempt. If you're experiencing trouble with this point, you may want to train it isolatedly, picking the sandbag up from a platform already at chest height. Now, with the sandbag on your chest, you will automatically bend your knees and lean backward. And that is fine, but it won't help you much if your upper back is sagging. You may also lose balance for a moment, so you have to take a step in whichever direction. That's not much of a problem either. But with a sandbag of a challenging weight, there is no chance you can complete the attempt if you hold your forearms merely horizontally in the chest position. Think about your upper chest as a tabletop. The more level you manage to hold it, the less likely the sandbag will be to slip down. As soon as the sandbag has reached the point at which it feels like your body is more under it than behind it, you can exhale and start continuous shallow breathing. As I've mentioned earlier, this will help you keep the buildup of lactic acid at bay. Now the transfer from the chest to the shoulder is another phase where the warfare analogy fits perfectly, because you as the leader will have to keep the balance of power between one arm pushing and the other one pulling. I'll come to that in a moment. But first, there are two more steps in the process that to me personally have proven to be conducive. To make it easier for me to explain, let's call the side on which the sandbag will end up on the shoulder ipsilateral and the other side contralateral. Okay, so here is the point at which you can profit from a tiny bit of momentum. Thrust the sandbag up with the power of your hip and knee extension, but only so much that it becomes weightless for a second. That will allow you to move your ipsilateral arm under it into kind of a searcher hold without the sandbag losing height on your chest. Without that move, your ipsilateral arm will have much worse leverage once you start rotating the sandbag over. The second step is literally a step, namely to the side, in order to widen your stance. Usually I take it with a contralateral leg. Compared to a narrow one, a wider stance allows your body to bend farther to the side without you losing balance. Bending your contralateral knee and core can become important in order to prevent the sandbag from falling off to the ipsilateral side. So these two steps, the ipsilateral grip change and the side step, are not totally indispensable. But they provide flexibility and adaptability, which in my opinion are the greatest advantages of the Warlord approach. In a moment you will see why. Now on the contralateral side, however, a grip change is essential. Just like before, get the sandbag weightless for a second by using a controlled thrust. During that phase, get your contralateral hand under it in a neutral wrist position, as if you wanted to press the sandbag overhead. This is the point at which the judicious balancing of power begins. Get your head out of the way, turning it to the contralateral side. Push the contralateral end of the sandbag up in several moves. To keep the torque optimal in this phase, work your hand down on the underside of the sandbag. Turning the sandbag from horizontal to vertical like that will increase the load on the static arm on the other side. Rotate too fast and forcefully and the ipsilateral arm will give in, the sandbag will sag down and you will miss the attempt. But don't take too much time either, or your strength will run out in both arms and also in your upper back. With your ipsilateral arm, try to keep the respective corner of the sandbag at the same height, unless your pushing arm is struggling with the weight. In that case, you may allow the ipsilateral side to sag down just a bit to facilitate the rotation. Of course, that will make the final part of the lift a bit harder, especially for your contralateral core. But if the rotation goes well, you can already start pulling the ipsilateral side up simultaneously. Ideally, as soon as the sandbag has passed your head, it should already be close to its tipping point on your shoulder. Otherwise, you have to also move your pushing arm to what is now the underside and shove with both hands upwards. This means you also have to lean to the contralateral side in order to keep the gravity center of the sandbag in the sagittal plane. Don't forget to keep breathing throughout that whole process. Also, there is no shame in applying a bit more thrust from your legs if you have to. At the top, take away your contralateral arm, but not before the sandbag has a slight tendency to tip over to the rear, because it is much easier to prevent that, since you just have to pull the front end down with your remaining arm, whereas you would have to push upwards to keep it from tipping to the front. And that's it. For good style and also to prove to yourself that your shoulder position is really stable, you may want to narrow your stance again. Smile and enjoy the moment. Then reverse the motions and bring the sandbag down again, preferably in a slow and controlled manner, just like the way up. Now, before I go, here is an important disclaimer. This lifting style has its distinct pros and cons. I am the first one to admit that for shouldering maximum weight, the Berserker approach may be the better one. No doubt, explosive movements and the resulting momentum are definitely very effective. But if and only if you are able to create enough of it and also direct it. And for some people, this may prove harder to learn than the slow and controlled method. Personally, my spine doesn't like me to jump under a heavy load. That may be one of the very few concessions to my higher age I am willing to make. Also, the slow and controlled Warlord approach is what allows me to lift a heavy sandbag with a considerable deficit, i.e. from way below foot level. That may even be kind of a specialty of mine. And I think it would be unwise to behave like a berserker when you're standing on top of a couple of plyo boxes. But what I like best about my style of sandbag shouldering is the adaptability to your body's current condition, to the always changing respective level of fatigue in all the involved body parts and muscle groups. The clean and uniform movements of the berserker do have their beauty, of course. Compared to that, the Viking horde as a whole may appear like kind of a messy bunch. So it is the cleverness and foresight of the Warlord that deploys them according to their personal strengths and weaknesses, and thus makes them emerge victorious even against all odds. Thank you for listening, and thanks again Cody for inviting me.
Thank you, Florian. If you want more sandbag lifting inspiration, please be sure to go check out his channel, Creative Training Hacks. As I said before, these two styles represent the extreme ends of what's possible. Most will probably find themselves somewhere in the middle, and that's great. There's no one right way to lift a sandbag, but it can be a lot of fun working towards something new. I hope this video motivated you to go train. Let me know if you plan on trying either of these methods, or if maybe you have another technique that's completely different than these. I'd love to see it. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.